The rain beat against the windows as Emily Decker stared at her phone screen in disbelief. Jake Morrison, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, had lied to her. A betrayal that cut deeper than anything she could have imagined. He wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with. He was part of a deadly game, and she was a pawn. But just as she was about to confront him, the unthinkable happened. Jake was found dead. Now, as Emily dives headfirst into the dark secrets of her family's past, she begins to question everything. Was Jake's death truly an accident? Or had someone close to her been hiding a far darker truth all along? In this twisted game of love, lies, and betrayal, will Emily uncover the truth before it destroys her? Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, so you don't miss any of the shocking twists ahead. You won't want to miss a single moment. The spring sun touched the rooftops affectionately as Emily Decker stretched in her bed. The sheriff's 19-year-old daughter put aside the novel she'd been reading into the night, another tale of forbidden love, passion, and overcoming obstacles. Emily sighed, imagining herself in the heroine's shoes. Her room was like a dreamer's sanctuary. Shelves of romantic books, posters of love movies, sketchbooks in which she poured out her fantasies. Emily, breakfast is ready. Her father's voice brought her back to reality. Coming, Dad, she called back. Sheriff Robert Decker, a tall man with graying dark hair, was frying bacon when his daughter came down to the kitchen. His uniform hung on the back of a chair, impeccably ironed. Good morning, sleepyhead. Been reading until dawn again, he smiled, but there was the usual worry in his eyes. Since his wife's death 10 years ago, Robert had raised his daughter alone. To all of Maplewood, he was a paragon of justice and reliability. But at home, he turned into a hen, overprotective of his only child. Are you going to college today? He asked, putting scrambled eggs on his daughter's plate. Yes, I have lectures until 3. Then I wanted to stop by the library, Emily replied. She picked up a piece of bacon with her fork. I get off at 5. I can pick you up, Dad. She rolled her eyes. I can take the bus like normal people. I'm in charge of safety in this town. He raised his eyebrows jokingly, but there was real concern behind the joke. Emily didn't argue. In 21st century suburban Philadelphia, she lived like a princess in a tower. Her father knew about all her movements, checked on her friends, disapproved of her parties, and she didn't date at all. There was no one to go out with in a town where everyone had known each other since childhood. Emily remained the sheriff's daughter to whom guys were afraid to approach. After eating breakfast, she kissed her father on the cheek and was about to leave when the doorbell rang. Delivery for Emily Decker, a deep male voice said. As she opened the door, Emily froze. A man in an Amazon uniform stood before her, tall, shouldering with 3-day stubble and eyes the color of stormy skies. His arms were covered in faded tattoos, and a scar was visible on his left wrist. He held a small box and a clipboard for signature. Is this for me? She reached out her hand for the package in confusion. I didn't order anything. Emily Decker, 12 Maple Street. He checked the delivery note. Sender, Old Cover Book Store. Oh, that's Aunt Martha, Emily remembered. Her mother's sister sometimes spoiled her with surprises. The man held out the clipboard, and as Emily signed, their fingers accidentally touched. She felt her cheeks redden. Thank you, she murmured. You're welcome, he nodded, turning toward the van with the Amazon logo on it. Are you new? She blurted out. I mean, I haven't seen you before. He turned around. Transferred from Philly 3 months ago. Jake. He didn't say his last name. At that moment, Sheriff Decker came out of the house, holstered. What's going on here? Just a delivery, Dad, Emily answered hurriedly. From Aunt Martha. The sheriff gave Jake a professional look, as if he were taking pictures for a file cabinet. Height, weight, special features. Jake endured the stare without a shadow of embarrassment. Good morning, Sheriff. He nodded with an impenetrable expression and got into the van. Robert turned to his daughter as the vehicle rounded the corner. Don't talk to strangers any more than you have to. He's just a courier. Dad. I don't know him, and newcomers to our town can't always be trusted. In college, Emily couldn't concentrate on her lectures. The image of the mysterious delivery man was in her mind's eye. She found a delivery tracking app on her phone and looked at the schedule. Jake was supposed to be delivering orders on the north side of town today. After class, instead of going to the library, she went to the Green Maple Cafe on the north end, sitting at the window with her psychology textbook. She watched the street with an edge of her eye. At exactly 4 o'clock, a blue van pulled up in front. Jake unloaded a few boxes and headed toward a nearby store. On the way back, he stopped at the cafe, apparently for coffee, and spotted Emily. Hi, he said, approaching her table. Did you like the package? A set of classics, she smiled, glad she hadn't lied. She'd gotten a collector's edition of Jane Austen from her aunt. Do you come to this neighborhood often? Tuesday and Thursday on schedule, he held up a cup of coffee. Are you in school? Psychology at the community college. She pointed to her textbook. And you? Only do deliveries. It was an odd question for a first conversation, but Emily couldn't help her curiosity. Yes, he answered with a slight chuckle. Why? Just, she hesitated. There are already rumors about you in town. You know, it's a small town. What are they saying? His eyes narrowed a little. That you're ex-military, that you have some mysterious history. She blushed, realizing how stupid that sounded. People need something to gossip about. He sipped his coffee. But yeah, I served in Iraq, Afghanistan. Nothing mysterious. The conversation was interrupted by his work phone ringing. I got to go. 10 more deliveries before the end of the shift. He headed for the exit, but turned around at the door. You shouldn't believe the rumors, Emily. Including rumors about me. That evening at dinner, the sheriff was unusually quiet. Dad, what's wrong? Emily asked, noticing the wrinkle between his eyebrows. Nothing much, just making inquiries about some new people in town, he said, setting his fork aside. That courier from this morning, have you seen him before? No, she answered honestly. Why? Nothing, just checking. He sighed. You know, since Mom's gone, Dad. It's been 10 years, Emily interrupted softly. You can't protect me forever. I can and I will, he said firmly. As long as you're under my roof. I'm 19, she objected. Other girls my age have long since. The other girls are not my daughters, the sheriff said, and they have different fathers. I know this world better than you do, Emily. I know what people are capable of. She turned away, feeling the familiar heaviness. Her father's love was like a blanket under which it was impossible to breathe. For the next 2 weeks, Emily deliberately arranged her routes so that she would accidentally cross paths with Jake. She learned that he was 33, rented a small trailer on the outskirts of town, liked black coffee without sugar, and read history books. Every conversation they had was short, but each time revealed a new facet of this strange, closed-off man. Jake never talked about the past, avoided questions about his family and his reasons for moving to Maplewood. But sometimes there was something like tenderness in his eyes when Emily shared her naive dreams. There was already talk in town about the sheriff's daughter's strange friendship with a delivery boy. Carol Baker, a neighbor and longtime friend of the Decker family, intercepted Emily outside the house one day. Honey, be careful, she said, nodding toward the departing delivery van. Your father's worried sick. We're just talking, Mrs. Baker. Of course we are, Emily defended herself. But you have to understand what it looks like. You're the sheriff's daughter, and his rumor has it he wasn't discharged from the army of his own accord. Rumors are just rumors, Emily said, surprised at her own audacity. But deep down, she knew that what had begun as innocent curiosity was growing into something more. For the first time in her life, Emily felt the thrill of mystery, the taste of the forbidden. Jake was the opposite of everything her father had personified. A rebel against order, freedom against control, the unknown against predictability. Every time she met him, she took a step further away from the protected world Sheriff Decker had so carefully built for her. May was unusually warm in Maplewood. The trees were dressed in lush foliage, and the air was filled with the scent of lilacs. For Emily, it was a spring of discovery. Every meeting with Jake opened the veil of mystery of this strange, closed man. Their meetings became regular. Thursday afternoons at the Green Maple, Saturdays at the town fair, the occasional random crossing at the supermarket. They talked about everything and nothing in particular. Jake listened to her stories about college, dreams of becoming a psychologist, and favorite books. Emily absorbed the rare, fragmentary stories about his service, the far-flung countries he'd been to. Emily pulled out her cell phone and texted, "Jake, can we meet tomorrow? Need to talk." They met at a lake outside of town, a small pier, old willows leaning against the water, a place that looked like it had stepped out of the pages of the romance novels Emily loved so much. "Father found out about us," she said at once, "or rather, he suspects. He's been checking into your past." Jake tensed. "And what did he find out?" "That you were in the Marines, that you were discharged after some incident in Afghanistan." She looked at him carefully. "Is that true?" "Partly." He turned away, looking at the water. "I did sive, and I did get discharged after an incident, but not exactly the way he thinks." "Can you tell me?" "Not now, Emily." He shook his head. "Maybe someday, but you should know that I would never hurt you. Never." She took a step toward him. "I believe you." Jake looked at her, very young, trusting, with eyes full of the kind of innocent adoration he didn't deserve. He should have stopped. He should have pushed her away. But instead, he slowly leaned in and kissed her. The world around Emily spun. It was her first real kiss, not the awkward attempts of boys at a school party, but the kiss of a man who knew what he was doing. Her heart was pounding so frantically that it felt like it was about to jump out of her chest. When they pulled away from each other, Jake ran his finger along her cheek. "We shouldn't do this." "Why not?" she whispered. "Because your father's right. I'm not the man you should be with." "I get to decide who I'm with," Emily said stubbornly, "and I choose you." For the next 2 weeks, they met in secret. Emily lied to her father, saying she was studying at the library or visiting friends. She and Jake drove to neighboring towns, walked in the woods, talked for hours. He opened up gradually, talking about his service, about the countries he'd been to, even about his childhood, but never about why he'd moved to Maplewood. Each encounter ended with longer kisses, bolder touches. Emily felt a new, unfamiliar desire growing inside her. Jake was reserved, never crossed a certain line, but she could see the fire in his eyes. "Why did you choose Maplewood?" she asked as they sat on the small couch, huddled together. "A fluke," he answered after a pause. "I was looking for a quiet place." Something flashed in his eyes, either pain or regret, but he quickly hid it behind a smile and kissed her. Sheriff Robert Decker sat in his office, looking at the picture of his daughter on his desk. Emily had lied to him again, saying she was spending the night at a friend's house. He called Jessica's mother under the pretense of clarifying the time he would pick up his daughter and learned that Emily wasn't there. Emily spent the weekend with Jake. They spent Saturday walking in a neighboring town and then returned to his trailer in the evening. When she awoke in the night, she saw Jake sitting at his desk, studying some papers. Noticing she was awake, he quickly put them away. "Work?" Emily asked sleepily. "Just something personal," he smiled. Sunday afternoon, Jake was unusually pensive. They were eating lunch on the small veranda of the trailer when he said, "Emily, there's something I have to tell you." "What?" She looked up from her toast. "I didn't come to Maplewood by accident." Emily froze. "What do you mean?" "I was looking for someone who might be able to shed some light on an old story," he said slowly. choosing his words. 15 years ago, my younger brother died under strange circumstances. Officially, an accident. But I always knew the truth was hidden. What's Maplewood got to do with it? She felt a chill run down her spine. Jake stared at her for a long moment before answering. Your father was the officer who investigated my brother's death at Cedar Grove. Emily felt the ground go from under her feet. What? No, that's impossible. After Timothy died, the case was quickly closed, and your father was soon transferred here to Maplewood. I spent years gathering information, trying to figure out what really happened. You're telling me that my father... She couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know exactly what happened, Jake said quietly. But your father was the last person to see Timothy alive and the first to find his body. Emily jumped up, feeling everything inside her turn upside down. Is that why you're with me? To get to my father? No. Jake grabbed her hands. I didn't know who you were at first. When I did, I thought I'd use it to get closer to the sheriff, but then everything changed. I fell in love with you, Emily. For real. I don't believe it. She pulled her hands away. You've been lying to me all this time. Not about everything. He looked at her pleadingly. What's between us is real, I swear. Emily grabbed her bag and ran out of the trailer, not listening to Jake calling her name. Tears covered her eyes as she got into the car. The man she'd opened her heart to, shared her most intimate things with, was using her as a pawn in his game against her father. At home, Emily locked herself in her room. The phone was ringing off the hook with Jake's calls, but she didn't answer. She needed time to process what she'd heard. Could what Jake had said be true? Was her father involved in his brother's death? That evening, the sheriff knocked on her door. Emily, are you all right? Yeah. She wiped away her tears. Just tired. Are you sure? There was concern in his voice. You seem upset. Dad. She paused. Did you ever work in a town called Cedar Grove? There was silence outside the door. How do you know? He finally asked. Just answer. Emily insisted. Yes, the sheriff said slowly, before he moved here. Emily, what's going on? Did you know Timothy Morrison? The question came out before she could think. The door opened abruptly. The sheriff stood in the doorway, pale as a sheet. Who told you? Jake, she answered quietly. His real name is Morrison. He's Timothy's brother. Robert Decker sank slowly onto his daughter's bed. I knew he came here for a reason. He says you were the last person to see his brother alive. Emily looked at her father, trying to see the truth in his eyes. Is that true? The sheriff was silent for a long moment before answering. Yes. I saw Timothy that night, patrolling by the lake. I spotted him with another guy, the mayor's son. They were drinking, making noise. I gave them a warning and left. 2 hours later, I got a call, body in the lake. What happened next? An investigation was launched. The mayor's son claimed Timothy went swimming alone and he'd already left. But the evidence said otherwise. Robert sighed heavily. I was pulled off the case when I started digging too deep, and then they told me to leave town for your safety. So we ran away. Emily asked incredulously. We started a new life, her father corrected gently. I couldn't risk you. After Mom died, you were all I had left. They sat in silence for a long time, digesting each other's revelations. What are you going to do about Jake? Emily finally asked. I'll talk to him, the sheriff said, rubbing his face tiredly. I'll tell him what I know. No, Emily said firmly. I never wanted his brother's death to go unpunished. I want to be there too, she added. Robert looked at his daughter carefully. Are you in love with him? I was. She looked away. Now, I don't know. Monday morning was gray and cool. Emily lay awake all night thinking about Jake, about her father, about the tangled history that had joined their fates. The sheriff entered her room at 7 in the morning, his face pale, his eyes red from sleep. Emily, he spoke softly but firmly. We just got a call in the trailer park. She felt her heart sink. What happened? Jake Morrison was found dead in his trailer. The sheriff watched his daughter's reaction carefully. Presumed murder. Emily looked at her father in shock. No, this can't be. This, he paused. I've called a detective from the county. The sheriff continued. Lisa Chong, the best specialist. She'll be here in an hour. I'm coming with you. Emily jumped up from bed. No, her father said firmly. You're staying home. This is a crime scene. Emily, and you were close to him. That makes you a suspect. She stared at her father incredulously. Do you think I could have? No, of course not. The sheriff shook his head. But procedure is procedure. Detective Chong will be talking to everyone who knew Jake, including you. He left her room and went downstairs. She stood frozen in the middle of her room, fighting the weight of 1,000 emotions. Was Jake dead because of her? For the first time in her life, she felt completely, utterly lost. Jake is dead. The man she'd loved, the man she'd hated for lying to her, the man she'd never had time to truly forgive or understand. He was gone. She remembered their last conversation, the accusations she'd thrown in his face. What if that had been their last meeting? What if he died thinking she hated him? By noon, Detective Lisa Chong, a short woman with a sharp, attentive gaze, showed up at the house. She settled herself in the living room, spreading out a notepad. Miss Decker, she began, I need to ask you some questions about Jake Morrison. I've already told my father everything, Emily replied quietly. Chong insisted gently. When was the last time you saw him? Yesterday morning. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. We had a fight. I found out that he came to Maplewood because of my father. The detective nodded, making notes. The sheriff told me about your family history, his connection to the Morrison family. That's a possible motive, but we need to look at all the leads. Who would kill him? Emily asked bluntly. I don't know yet, Chong answered honestly. The coroner puts the time of death between 10 p.m. and midnight. Single gunshot to the chest, close range, professional, quick, like the killer knew what he was doing. Emily whispered. The detective looked at her carefully. Exactly. Someone who knows how to handle a gun. Do you suspect my father? Emily raised her eyes to Chong. I suspect anyone who might have a motive, she answered calmly, including the people at Cedar Grove. Jake Morrison's story doesn't end in Maplewood. It began 15 years ago by the lake. The Maplewood Police Department was buzzing like a beehive. Detective Lisa Chong, who had arrived from the county, had turned the empty conference room into her temporary headquarters. Crime scene photos, diagrams, and timelines hung on the walls. At the center of it all was a portrait of Jake Morrison. Emily nervously rubbed the sleeve of her sweater as she sat in the interview room. Detective Chong entered with 2 glasses of coffee, one of which she placed in front of the girl. I understand this is hard for you, Chong said, taking the seat across from her. But I need to ask you some questions. I've already told you everything, Emily said quietly. Not quite everything. The detective opened a file folder. You said you saw Jake on Saturday and never spoke to him again. But his phone records show that he called you on Sunday night and the conversation lasted almost 20 minutes. Emily turned pale. I didn't want to tell. Emily, Jake is dead, Chong said softly but firmly. Whatever happened between you two could be important to the investigation right now. The girl took a deep breath. He called late last night, said he had something important to tell me about my father, about why he'd really come to Maplewood. And what exactly did he tell you? That 15 years ago, his younger brother Timothy drowned under strange circumstances. My father, then a police officer at Cedar Grove, was in charge of the investigation. The case was dismissed as an accident, but Jake always thought the truth had been covered up, that his brother was murdered, and he suspected your father. Emily lowered her gaze. He said he'd been gathering evidence against him for years, and then she swallowed the lump in her throat. He said he'd initially gotten close to me to gain access to my father. Used me. How did you react? Angry. Hung up. Disconnected the phone. Emily grinned slightly. I wanted to forget him, and the next morning, I found out he was dead. Chang tapped her pencil on the table thoughtfully. Do you think your father could have found out about this conversation? About Jake's suspicions? No. Emily looked at the detective indignantly. My father is not a murderer. He was home all night. Of course. Chang held up her hand reassuringly. I'm just checking all the leads. But who else did you tell about Jake's call? Emily hesitated. No one. Well, just Carol Baker. She came by Monday morning, brought blueberry muffins. She noticed I was upset, and I shared. Interesting. Chang made a note in her notebook. And how did Mrs. Baker react? She said I was lucky to be rid of Jake. That Dad was right, and he wasn't the man I should be with. Emily frowned, thinking back on it now. She looked strange, flustered, but I wrote it off as her usual concern. And how many hours after that conversation was Jake's body found? I don't know exactly, Emily started, and then suddenly froze, realizing, wait, do you think Carol had something to do with the murder? I don't think anything yet, Chang replied flatly. I'm just gathering information. Sheriff Decker studied the papers from Jake's trailer, spread out on the table. There were newspaper clippings of Timothy Morrison's death, copies of police reports, tapes of eyewitness interviews, and a notebook of Jake's own notes in which he methodically built an accusation against Robert Decker. He was persistent, Chang said as she entered the office. 15 years of searching for the truth. The truth? The sheriff chuckled bitterly. He was looking for confirmation of his story. He convinced himself from the beginning that I had something to do with his brother's death. Were you involved? The detective asked bluntly. Decker was silent for a long time, staring at the picture of Timothy Morrison, a smiling boy with red hair and freckles. Not the way he thought, the sheriff finally replied. I did investigate that case, and I was indeed the last person to see Timothy alive, aside from the actual killer. But I never harmed him. On the contrary, I tried to get to the truth, which was an accident during a fight. Decker sighed heavily. Timothy got into a fight with the mayor's son, Michael Preston. They were drinking by the lake, got into an argument. Timothy hit his head on a rock and passed out. Michael panicked and pushed him into the water to cover his tracks. Was you a witness? No, the sheriff answered. I was patrolling the neighborhood, and I came upon Michael while he was still at the lake. I picked him up. He confessed, but before I could bring him in, his father, William Preston, mayor of Cedar Grove, intervened. A powerful man with a lot of connections. And what happened? Chang watched the sheriff closely. The case was dropped. Preston explained to me that it looked like an accident, and there was no point in messing up two families. He put pressure on his superiors. Decker clenched his fists. When I kept pushing, the threat started. First me, then Emily. After my wife died, she was everything to me. I couldn't risk it. So you moved to Maplewood. The detective nodded. Yeah, started a new life, hoping the past was behind me. He grinned bitterly. And then Jake Morrison showed up, who thought you were guilty. That's right, Decker added grimly. Figured I'd helped cover it up by taking a bribe or giving in to pressure. Never considered the possibility that I was the victim. Chang tapped her pen on her notebook thoughtfully. What do we know about Jake after his brother died? He immersed himself in the investigation, graduated from high school, joined the Army, served in the Marines, discharged 5 years ago, got his private investigator's license, worked in Philadelphia. The deputy reported checking the paperwork, and all that time, he was looking for evidence against me, Decker added grimly. When he finally found where I lived, he devised a whole plan. Moved to Maplewood, created a cover story about working at Amazon, started gathering information. Then he tried to use his connection to Emily to push things further. He manipulated her. Chang concluded, "Exactly." Timothy hit his head on a rock and passed out. Michael panicked and pushed him into the water to cover his tracks. "Was you a witness?" "No," the sheriff answered. "I was patrolling the neighborhood, and I came upon Michael while he was still at the lake. I picked him up. He confessed, but before I could bring him in, his father, William Preston, mayor of Cedar Grove, intervened. A powerful man with a lot of connections." "And what happened?" Chang watched the sheriff closely. The case was dropped. Preston explained to me that it looked like an accident, and there was no point in messing up two families. He put pressure on his superiors. Decker clenched his fists. When I kept pushing, the threat started. First me, then Emily. After my wife died, she was everything to me. I couldn't risk it. "So you moved to Maplewood?" The detective nodded. "Yeah, started a new life, hoping the past was behind me." He grinned bitterly. "And then Jake Morrison showed up, who thought you were guilty." "That's right," Decker added grimly. "Figured I'd helped cover it up by taking a bribe or giving into pressure. Never considered the possibility that I was the victim." Chang tapped her pen on her notebook thoughtfully. "What do we know about Jake after his brother died?" "He immersed himself in the investigation, graduated from high school, joined the Army, served in the Marines, discharged 5 years ago, got his private investigator's license, worked in Philadelphia." The deputy reported checking the paperwork, "And all that time, he was looking for evidence against me," Decker added grimly. "When he finally found where I lived, he devised a whole plan, moved to Maplewood, created a cover story about working at Amazon, started gathering information. Then he tried to use his connection to Emily to push things further. He manipulated her." Chang concluded, "Exactly." As Emily sat in the quiet aftermath of her father's words, she realized that the world she thought she knew was unraveling in ways she couldn't have imagined. Jake, the man she had trusted and loved, was dead, and the tangled web of lies, secrets, and buried truths was just beginning to unfurl. The detective, Lisa Chang, would soon arrive, and Emily knew her life would never be the same. But one thing was certain. Her father had always protected her, even when it meant keeping painful truths from her. He had done everything in his power to shield her from the darkness of the world, and now it was up to her to face that darkness head-on. Would she find the truth? Would justice prevail for Jake and the life they shared? Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. There was no going back now. She had to move forward, face the secrets, and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. It would take courage, determination, and an unshakable belief in herself to navigate the storm ahead. And so, dear audience, as the story of Emily and Jake concludes, we invite you to join us on this wild ride of secrets, betrayal, and redemption. If you enjoyed the twists and turns, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting moment. Because the story might be over for now, but the journey is just beginning.